Hello everyone, how's it going? So I haven't done a reaction for a while, so I'm gonna do one with the Critical Drinker. He has this secondary channel focusing more on games, and this one piqued my interest. I haven't watched it yet. It's about why modern games suck. They won't stop holding my hand. So let's see what our favorite Scotsman has to say about modern gaming.
If you've played video games as long as I have, then you'll probably have your fair share of games that absolutely wrecked you. Whether it's a boss battle so tough that you wanted to put your controller through the screen, or a puzzle so obtuse that you had no choice but to throw your hands up in defeat and consult an online guide, or a tricky skill-based section that had you tearing your hair out because you just couldn't make that final jump in time. We've all been there because it's all part and parcel of completing games. You're not always going to overcome every obstacle first time or know exactly where you need to go next, because if you did, then the game wouldn't present a challenge and there would be no point in playing it. And when you do,
and the thing is, keeping your cool during that type of situation, it's so hard. I don't know how people like Josh Drive Hayes or Sandwiches does it. Like, that guy died like Sandwiches. He was doing a challenge run for Sekiro on its hardest difficulty without healing items. The guy died like, I think, 500 times to a single boss. Never lost his cool. He was frustrated and annoyed, but he kept like smiling throughout and just said, I'm having a good time. I don't know how people do that. I literally, when I lost against the secret boss in Wukong 8 times, I beat him like on my 9th or 10th time. I was about to like smash my screen. Like, I don't know how people how people keep their morale in that way. Ricard, he was easy though. I kicked his ass.
Do finally struggle through to the end, bloodied and tired but triumphant, it's a pretty good feeling because you've done something that was actually pretty difficult. You persevered and kept plugging away even when it seemed impossible, and you've ultimately become a winner. Or you can just play a modern mainstream game that'll do basically everything in its power to remove every possible source of frustration or confusion, to the point where the experience is more like watching a movie with occasional button presses to trigger the next cutscene. And the overall experience is about as satisfying as trying to have a deep and meaningful conversation with a stripper. It's become kind of a cliche in recent years that modern games are becoming easy to the point of parody, whether it's old favourites like the dreaded yellow paint telling you which direction to head next, or which ledges you can climb and which—
Okay, criticism about this. The reason I'm 34 years old, I've been playing games for a very long time, and yeah, I do agree about the yellow thing. Like, it can be annoying because obviously this isn't natural, just having yellow paint there. But at the same time, be honest with yourself. How many of you would be able to see that ledge that you're going to grab if you didn't have that yellow paint there? I would say at least half of the player base wouldn't be able to do that. Granted, there are creative ways in which game developers have bypass this. For example, I don't know how many people know this, but in Stellar Blade, they actually have broken street signs pointing you in the right direction. It took me a second to notice that. I was like, holy crap, there's literally a damaged street sign pointing up or left or right. That is actually a brilliant idea. Like, the idea of using the terrain to push the player into that direction, or put in something there that, clicks on them and say, where do I go? Oh, there's a sign there. Maybe I should go check it out. And then it says, warning, do not climb up the cliff, danger ahead, or something like that. That could have been a lot more adequate. But I also feel like this is easier for people who probably don't see that well. Like, that's the thing. When you start to talk to people who have certain handicaps, it becomes a little more apparent of why they do this stuff too. It's because some people don't see as well, so the yellow paint does help them. So there is like certain situations like that makes it easier. Like, you know how you tap the button in order to make actions happen? If you grew up during the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 age, we all know about QuickTime events. But here's the thing. Not everyone could tap the button as quickly as possible. I'm getting older, and I can tell you right now, tapping a button repeatedly, like in Mario Party 64, where you have to tap a button repeatedly for a mini game, it's not as easy as it is when I was like 15, because now my fingers don't operate as well. It gets, like, you heard that snap right there. So I almost always turn that off if the game has it, or I choose to hold the option because that's a lot easier on my fingers. I think that's a little too harsh, because there are reasons for that when you start to look at it from outside the box.
which jumps you can make, to mini-maps where your next objective is highlighted and even the most efficient path has been programmed in, to in-game prompts and exasperated dialogue from your own character if you get stumped on a puzzle for more than 30 seconds, to patronizing suggestions that you switch to retarded toddler mode.
That actually I hate. Like, when you pick a difficulty, especially when there's a difficulty-related trophy and achievement, and they put that stupid-ass option where if you like, even worse, they put, like, a prompt to click OK, and it's usually highlighted, and it's the default option. So when you click A or X or whatever, automatically switched, and your run is over. Like, I hate that. I don't want to change the difficulty. I picked that difficulty for a reason. Shut the hell up. As for the other option, yeah, I can see it being annoying if the player monologues to himself, hey, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. Games usually have an option to turn that off now, where you can turn off that type of system. But I also think it's a way to give an in-game guide, because I grew up without the internet, like a lot of people my age. And the thing is, when you get stuck on a puzzle, usually you just go to YouTube and stuff like that. I feel like that's an in-game way of giving the player a help guide. Like, it just gives the player an option that they don't have to look it up, gives them a slight hint, and pushes them into that direction. Granted, I can't really think of a way to resolve that type of issue. The other option would be like, the camera would zoom into a certain area or stuff like that, maybe that, but I honestly, you have to look at it from the gamer playing the game without any type of outside help, because it's easy when you can look on YouTube or a website and find the assistance you needed, but it's a little different when you just play the game raw without any type of outside help. Like, it's a completely different experience. Like, if you play Dark Souls, like any From Software game, without any type of outside help, I guarantee you're going to have a radically different experience. It's going to be something, especially a game like Dark Souls 1, Bloodborne. Those are the only two examples I can give at the moment, because those are the games I played. I can't say for Demon Souls. Play that game without a freaking map. Without, like, one of those maps that people have drawn out, or directions of where to go. Yeah, good luck.
If you get killed more than a few times on a boss battle. All of these different annoyances stem from the same basic problem.
And in this example with Horizon, that yellow thing actually is pretty well done. It shows where you can and can't climb, because when you climb up a mountain, I guarantee you there are a lot of players like myself who got frustrated on certain areas where you couldn't climb. And then the previous game, this was actually a good compromise from the previous game, where they just had like notches in the mountain where they're like climbing notches and you can only climb on those. I think this was a fair change. Like, I think this was better, because in Assassin's Creed Origins, you could climb up mountains like this, but the thing is, they didn't have central points like this. You can literally just climb up a mountain, like literally off the edge. No stamina meter, no nothing, and it broke the game. Literally, you could climb up the side of a cliff onto a fortress, kill the main target, and climb back down, no problem. So, it's a balancing act. So, I can understand where they're, like here, I disagree with him, because it kind of needs this, because without this type of system, you're going to be like, okay, what part of the mountain cannot climb on? It will be really frustrating.
So many games today just won't leave you alone to play the fucking thing. They constantly feel the need to hold your hand, keep you on the correct track, reward you for the simplest actions, and push you forward to the next big dopamine.
In that regard, with Final Fantasy VII Remake, that's kind of a cutscene, actually. It's an interactive cutscene. Like, I get what he's saying with that. I agree with him. Final Fantasy VII Remake isn't really open world. It's semi-open world. There's just one thin line of Midgar you can walk through. But that's the interactive cutscene from the original Final Fantasy VII. Instead, you're playing through it instead of just watching it. But I get what he's saying here.
Hits. It's like being put in the world's most awesome play park as a kid, but you've got some neurotic, overprotective parent hovering around you at all times, ready to jump in if you even think about doing something vaguely dangerous. It sucks all the fun out of the experience, because you feel like you never have the freedom to explore the world on your own terms. You're always being forced down the path that other people want you to walk. Now, don't get me wrong here, I understand that world traversal and environmental interaction in games is always a balancing act between exploratory freedom and player convenience, and the larger and more complex your game world becomes, the more you have to compromise the former to maintain the latter.
There's also another thing that I think he should bring up, it's budget. Like, at the end of the day, you are confined to a certain budget, time, effort, team members. You just don't have the amount of freedom when you create something, especially when you create a semi-open world or an open world. Like stuff like that, it eventually gets over ballooned, and then you start to create elements that players probably won't engage with. Like I think I used Elden Ring as an example. Elden Ring, there are certain areas in that game that people have never explored. I guarantee it. There are areas that I'm discovering when I'm replaying the game to get the Platinum Trophy on the PS4 version. Like, there was a dungeon in Rykard's Lair that I never knew existed. Like, it's literally by the lava lake. And there are stuff like that you have to risk when you put into these games, because sometimes there are areas that the people will never even discover or even want to go through.
Simply dumping someone into a game world the size of Witcher 3, for example, with no indication of where they should go or what they should do next, is a pretty challenging prospect for any player. But that doesn't mean you have to
I know I'm pausing a lot, but I disagree with that, and I played through The Witcher 3 multiple times. They generally give you an idea of where you have to go. I get what he's saying, like, they do plop you down and you can go whatever the hell you want, for the most part. I mean, unless you want to go into an area where you're under leveled and get completely crushed. But it is two different games, with Final Fantasy VII Remake, the original one, and Witcher 3, two very different games. Like, I think Final Fantasy VII Remake is more in line with Witcher 2, Assassin of Kings.
Constantly intrude on their gaming experience and actively push them towards the next waypoint, because once you insert that kind of persistent low-level navigation aid into the game, it starts to do weird things to you psychologically. Like, it becomes this persistent task that you feel you have to attend to. Like,
Not
you
really.
shouldn't dwell too long in any particular place because the game expects you to move along to the next story event. It's kind of like how drivers are slowly losing the ability to navigate with maps and road signs and generally think for themselves, because why bother when you've got a convenient little screen that'll tell you exactly where to head next, and it'll even find a new route if you have a brain fart and take a wrong turn. If the system is basically foolproof, then well, it kind of encourages people to become fools in return.
Well, I disagree with that in this regard. I know I'm disagreeing with him with a lot of things, because in this situation, when you're supposed to look for a key item, or you're in like a very exact location, like for example, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, there's this type of investigation system, and when you go into the area, there is no way to indicate whether you've moved too far from the exact area you're supposed to investigate, and a lot of players who looked through my walkthroughs said the same thing. They had no idea if they went too far, or they're too, like, they're not in the right area. Like, Batman Arkham Knight fixed that by immediately putting you into first-person mode with detective vision if you get into an area that you need to investigate and you move too far away from it. So that highlight is necessary, especially for a large, like, he was in, I can't remember the name of it, Caden Morden? God, I'm sorry, I'm bad with names. The School of the Wolves main training ground for Witcher 3. So in that regard, yeah, that area is pretty big, and especially in the open end of the game, if they don't tell you, hey, look around in that exact area, chances are you'll go downstairs and outside. But I think that was also the opening area where you're with Yennefer and you're training Ciri, so that's a flashback. But in certain circumstances, that's necessary to tell the player, hey, you've gone too far from the key area, that you need to look for this key item, and they'll end up getting lost and getting frustrated, and that becomes a real thing. How many times have you gotten frustrated from a game because you didn't know if you moved too far from a key location where you're supposed to locate an exact item? Resident Evil is actually a profound example of this. In the original Resident Evil games, you were given the freedom to go wherever you want in the mansion, but the issue was that players would get incredibly lost because they had no idea where the key item they needed in order to lock that door was. I guarantee a lot of us used guides for that, and even during the PlayStation era when I was born, I can hear my cousins and my family when they played Resident Evil talking to one another and saying, where did he get this item? Where did I get that item? And I remember they were going, how the hell was I ever supposed to figure that out? Like, literally. So games have modernized themselves where developers have understood that, hey, if you need the key for a specific item, you either have to funnel the player to that location, or it has to be within reasonable distance of the location you have to be in. It's ultimately to ensure that the synergy between the players' understanding of what they need to do and what is expected of them matches well. It's hard to complement. And I can understand when players get frustrated because they feel like their hands are being held and they feel like they're being talked down to. But at the same time, I feel like the opposite of being too frustrated can also lead to problems. So it's a balancing act.
It's the same thing when it comes to jumping and climbing around, where most games seem to lock your character into a couple of predefined paths like a train on rails, and not only will they refuse to let you deviate from them, but they'll even prevent you from trying jumps that you can't make. The early
you'll
Tomb Raider
die.
games, for example, often demanded precision jumps and fast reflexes to make progress, and if you fucked up either of those things, then guess what? It was game over. But the upside to all of that is that there was often multiple ways to get through a level, and how you chose to do it depended on your own instincts and gaming style. Sometimes with enough experimentation you could even unlock secret routes and hidden areas that even the developers hadn't thought of. But the remake series on the other hand,
they're called
locks you onto
glitches.
set paths for the bulk.
Like, I never played Tomb Raider. I only played, like, I can only compliment with Super Mario 64. That's the game I played a lot when I was a kid. And I understand where he's coming from. Like, there were always, like, multiple ways you can get to the stars. Yeah, there was a way the developers intended, but if you were skilled enough, you can find other ways to evade certain sections of the game properly and just get the star through other means. It gave you full control of what you wanted to do, and since then, players have found new ways to try and complement that type of skill within their games. Like, for example, with Super Mario Odyssey, the developers included rewards for players who got to areas they never intended to. Like, I remember they said they gave early copies to speedrunners, and when they got to locations they were never intended to, they would put a bunch of coins there as a small reward for players who accomplished that. But I would also argue it is due to limitations in tech or advancements. Like, in limitations for tech, I guess the jumps had to be a little more precise because of how they were crafted. Like, Tomb Raider was one of the vanguards when it came to 3D entertainment. So as advancements made with graphical updates, like this example he's using here with the tree, how many of you would know to climb that tree if there wasn't like some sort of prompt or, you know, that little white ledge you can see up there that allows you to show, hey, you can climb up there? I would say a lot of us would say no. Like, it's with the yellow paint situation. How many of us would take notice to that, see that little ledge that looks differently? And even then, I feel like you can make the counter argument about that little ledge just happens to be the perfect grab for a natural forming mountain. Like, you have to offer some level of convenience. At the end of the day, games are meant to be fun, and if you get frustrated because you didn't see that little notch that you're supposed to jump onto, well, it's not fun anymore.
Of your climbing, won't let you jump beyond your reach, allows Lara to stick to walls like a fucking magnet.
I'm surprised he hasn't mentioned like Elden Ring or Dark Souls yet in this, because it goes direct. I'm just surprised he hasn't mentioned like Dark Souls or Elden Ring, because these games literally, well, they kind of complement what he's trying to say, because those games do not hold your hand in no way. Yeah, they always lead you to Ando Londo, or in Elden Ring to the Mountain of the Giants, but the way you get there is your own accord. There are multiple ways you can get into the location you need to get to. Like when you try and get to Margaret, like the first Omen, the boss fight, and if you just bullet there because you're going to have to fight him, he'll beat you into the dirt. Then it's basically you, hey, go and explore this wide world, go find new spells, new weapons, new armor, go fight the dragon in the lake, learn different skills and talents, then come back and fight. So I'm a little surprised it's like halfway through the video and he hasn't even mentioned the very games that go against what he's trying to argue with modern gaming.
By environmental hazards. And if there's no skill involved in that kind of world traversal, and it's basically just a linear series of button presses, then really, what's the point in even doing it? There was a similar problem with the Resident Evil series that used to give players a decent sized gaming world to explore, with multiple routes to get from one side of the map to another that always had to be balanced against enemy placement and resource availability, and just kind of let you do whatever you wanted. You had to investigate every room, explore thoroughly, try different ideas and see what might work. Now, your route ahead is so obviously spelled out, your objective is marked so clearly on the map, and every box and objects that you should be looking at is so clearly marked that there's no real sense that you're exploring or finding anything anymore. You're really just going around collecting the things that the game wants you to pick up, and seeing the things the game wants you to see without...
Okay, first off, that's not true for every Resident Evil. Like, Resident Evil 4 at its core is an action horror game. Puzzle solving is kind of the back, they push that to the back. And there is a Resident Evil modern game that contradicts what he just said. It's called Resident Evil 7. Like, when you play on Madhouse difficulty, it does exactly what he's arguing against. it literally randomizes all the locations of all the items, all the key items, randomized, so you actually have to look for them in different locations throughout the game while, you know, the Baker family's hunting you down. Like when the father's hunting you down and you're looking for that exact item just to open up the secret entrance. It's pretty intense. So, you know, two different themes, two different Resident Evil games, kind of contradicts what he's saying here.
Feeling like you're achieving a whole lot by yourself. My point here is that environmental navigation, like every other aspect of gaming from the puzzles up to the final boss, should offer a reasonable level of challenge and exploratory freedom for the player, giving them the ability to experiment with different strategies while providing just enough clues. And
he's really anal about this mountain climbing section. Like, I played Final Fantasy VII Rebirth to completion. I played it on hard difficulty. The only trophies I'm missing are the Chadley Challenge trophies and the piano one for the rhythm game. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth gives you a very wide array of exploration options, from secret bosses to hidden locations. There's an entire quest line that leads you down a path against a super secret optional boss that I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, he's really anal about this yellow paint on this mountain. Look, I get it, but at the same time, I don't think that's that big of a deal.
Hence to keep them heading in roughly the right direction. It means having enough faith in them to take the training wheels off and actually let them play and make mistakes for themselves, and this is where I think modern gaming seems to be going wrong. And it seems to be born out of this flawed belief that if players are left to their own devices for too long, they'll get bored and frustrated and move on to something else. It's actually not that different from a lot of mainstream movies when I think about it. The need to constantly keep the audience engaged with the next bit of CGI spectacle, the next action scene, the next member berry, instead of giving them slightly more challenging but less action-packed material to chew on.
I mean, he is kind of right at that. Most AAA games are playing it safe. They don't give people the same avenue of freedom as they once did. But when it comes to modern games, there are examples of people who want that, like with Black Myth Wukong. It's the exploration elements in Black Myth Wukong, I would say, run parallel with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, because yeah, both of them have secrets, both of them do funnel you down a linear path during exact sections within the game. Like, for the most part, Black Myth Wukong is a semi-open world game, but it always lures you down the exact path because there are a lot of invisible walls, but there are optional areas, secret boss fights, locations. But he is right that they do give more safeguards nowadays than they do when games used to be more experimental. Like, again, he used Tomb Raider a lot, but Tomb Raider was a very experimental game when it came to 3D technology, one of the vanguards, right up there with Super Mario 64 with its omnidirectional gameplay. So again, I can't speak for Tomb Raider, I never played the original games, but with Super Mario 64 you were given ample freedom to do whatever you want, but you were still always luring down the same path of defeating Bowser and saving Peach. So I agree and disagree with him in a lot of points here, but it's still weird that he constantly brings up the Final Fantasy VII yellow paint thing. Like, again, I made my argument with that, and I feel like it's not that big of a deal, but I could be wrong about that. A lot of people are seemingly annoyed by the yellow paint, and I get it, but I also think that if you're a developer, like, would you spend a large amount of time just trying to figure out a natural way to put the player to go up in that mountain, or would you rather just take 5 seconds to put yellow paint there? That's how I kind of see it. Yeah, it can be seen as lazy, but at the same time, when you have a multi-million-dollar game and you spent over 4 years making it, and then you have to spend more time that's necessary for something that should be a simple thing, I think a lot of us would probably take the simple, because at the end of the day, more people are more focused in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's story than they are focused on the yellow paint on the mountain. Maybe I'm just seeing it wrong.
It underestimates the resilience of the average player and their ability to stick with a game that they're invested in, even if it throws a few frustrations their way. And I think this is where the real problem stems from. Modern game devs aren't sure of their ability to hook players with a gripping storyline, compelling characters, or rewarding gameplay.
I mean, Dark Souls and Elden Ring did it.
Craft those things for other reasons. So instead, they're forced to rely on a steady stream of low-level rewards.
He's not wrong, though, with that.
Spectacle and constant progression with near zero obstacles to keep them from getting bored. Partly I think this problem's come about because the definition of what a gamer is has become so broad in recent years that it's practically meaningless now, usually so that companies like Sweet Baby can claim that 50% of them are female by including teenage girls who mindlessly swipe away at Candy Crush on their phones once a week. And well, if you want to attract a hypothetical audience who don't actually like traditional games, then I guess you need to make them easier and more accessible for everyone.
I mean, the thing with that is the market will always determine what is most popular no matter what. Like, look, there are girls like certain games and entertainment, and guys like certain games and entertainment. Who would have thought like a game like Black Myth Wukong about a D&D monkey who smashes demons with a big stick would appeal to men? Like, men tend to play games like that. We like Armored Core, we like Final Fantasy, we like Halo, Call of Duty. Girls tend to play World of Warcraft and also Final Fantasy as well. But we have different tastes and different things that we love. And when you try to appeal to everyone, you end up not appealing to anyone, ultimately. And in the case of Star Wars Outlaws and even Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, I can't speak for Star Wars Outlaws, but based on what I've seen of reviews and reception, everyone said it's painfully average. Like, nothing about it is extraordinary. Like, a lot of people like myself have argued how incredible Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor were because the characters were so brilliant. They actually had motivations, issues, problems they had to overcome, emotional drive. When Cal was pushed to the dark side because of losing everyone, Seer, his crew, and he was just brought back from oblivion by the people in his life, BD1, Merlin, all of them. It was just like one of those great moments where you see his emotion just cripple himself and he's just trying to find any reason to keep going forward. It was a great story. But based on what I've heard about Star Wars Outlaws, a lot of people don't have the same impact with, her name is Kay Vess, I believe. Like, she just doesn't look interested at all. And without that, it's the same issue that happened with Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. They had a really good foundation for creating a great Avatar game. I 100%ed the game, but it wasn't good. And the reason it wasn't good was because it was painfully average. They had the option to like create a story where Na'vi were raised by humans, and they could have made it that the Na'vi actually like the humans. They feel like they're more attached to humanity than they are to their own species, and that could have been a great narrative. The idea of like, hey, I like humans, I want to be with them, I feel more connected with them than I with my own people. And they did have a character like that. It's called Talon, but they just never wanted to take the leap per se. It's not like with classic Ubisoft games like Assassin's Creed where they had more risk involved. Nowadays they just try and play it safe, and it's definitely shown because I saw that their stock has dropped to an all-time low.
But mostly I think it comes down to a lack of confidence, not just in their audience.
Oh my god, this game died today. They're shutting down servers Friday. Oh my god.
More importantly, in their own product, and it's proof that even movie scale budgets, incredible visuals, and dev teams number in the hundreds are no substitute for a good rewarding story and interesting characters. Most of my favourite games of all time look laughable by today's graphical standards, but it doesn't matter to me because quality gameplay and storytelling is more than enough to make up for any visual.
I like how he complained about navigation in these types of games. They literally have arrows. Like, I remember in Final Fantasy VII, they were pretty damn obvious of where you had to go next. Like, going from point A to point B, like when you got out of the gold saucer, literally there was only one direction you can go. Or when you got out of Midgar, there was just literally one direction you could go. So, and again, navigation was very simple. I don't know. Like, this was a classic, though. I can't, like, they did an incredible job for the time they had. Like, playing this back in the day, I was just like, oh my god, it brought back so many memories.
Visual shortcomings. And yeah, I know that you've always got games like Dark Souls and Elden Ring if you're really in the mood for a challenge, but let's be honest here, those games are designed for a very specific audience. I know I'm generalising a bit, but I think the average gamer probably doesn't have enough time and energy to grind their way through games like that, where your average boss can take dozens if not hundreds of attempts to beat. And believe me, I'm not exempt from that either. I bought Elden Ring off the back of all the hype and put a good 20 or 30 hours into it before deciding, yeah, this game's not really for me. Not that I disliked it or anything, but after eventually defeating the first several bosses, I knew that getting good enough to beat the whole game was going to take more time than I had, and the process would probably be more frustrating than enjoyable. And for me...
Okay, the time thing, I understand. Elden Ring took me around 180 hours to 100% all the trophies, platinum, the PS5 version, everything. I'm going back to the PS4 version. But I find it a little funny that he goes through this kind of like huge essay about how modern games suck by holding the player's hand through navigational systems that have become a lot easier so players can directly see where they need to go and how to efficiently, well, I don't know, like efficiently go through the game without having to look up guides and have all the necessary tools within the game. Elden Ring literally doesn't tell you shit. Literally, it dives you into the world, and yeah, there are some secrets there that you can't find through just reading the item or talking to the NPCs, but for a large majority of the game, they don't tell you crap. There are literal secret paths that require you to hit a freaking wall 100 times because its health is so damn high. There are hidden walls that you'll never be able to locate unless you have a guide. So this game literally is the epitome of everything that goes against his thesis statement. And he said it's not for me because I just don't have the time, which I understand. Like I said, Elden Ring is a massively huge game, but and this game sold very well. It sold 10 million copies. So there is an audience for this type of game, and more than just like the hardcore gamer, the average gamer also likes this game because, let's face it, Elden Ring, yeah, it is a tough game. No doubt about it. Like anyone who says, oh, this is not that tough, it is a tough game. Like unless you're a Giga Chad, like one of those speedrunners who are able to beat the game with level 1, no armor, freaking Vanguard build, you're not going to beat this game casually. You need to look up every strategy, find every advantage, and there are cheap builds like magic and very powerful summons like the Mimic tier. But for the most part, the game is been casualized compared to Dark Souls. I played the original Dark Souls, and I can tell you right now, the original Dark Souls is a level of hell that you probably, if you've beat Elden Ring, go play Dark Souls 1 and you'll see what I mean. Or go play Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 to me was the hardest one. But yeah, this is literally the game that does not hold your hand for anything. It literally kicks you out of the door and says, go. Let's see you beat Melania and Promise Consort Radahn. And, well, technically it is Miquella, but you know what I mean. But yeah, so this is literally the game that just said, you know what, you want that? Here it is. It's too long. But you wanted this!
Life's just too short for that kind of shit. So I guess what I'm saying with all my pish is that I think a lot of people are probably in a similar boat to
Stellar Blade is also an example. Like, it technically is semi-open, and there are optional areas that you can explore after you've completed certain side quests, but for the most part, this is also kind of linear. They tell you where to go. They're like, go that direction. Go that direction. And even if you can't find it, just look for the big thing that looks out of place. Like, literally, just look for the big tower. You just have to go there. But, you know.
To me, good enough to find the hand-holding and constant assistance of mainstream games patronizing and unnecessary, but not really willing to play.
You literally just complained about Elden Ring being too long, giving you that.
Middle ground of challenging difficulty, exploratory freedom, and just being left alone to play the fucking game is what most average people are looking for, and it seems to be some.
But you just said that the average gamer doesn't have the time for a game like Elden Ring, which gives you exactly that, and I guess it's just if Elden Ring was shorter for him, maybe that's why it would have been a more viable option. But I remember his Stellar Blade argument. He made the same argument there, but with Stellar Blade, they more or less hold your hand in a way. I think what he's arguing against is that there are just too many tutorials, like too many games that won't leave you alone and let you explore, which is a fair argument. But the way I'm looking at it, like I made in the argument of this video, was that the way the developers are internalizing all these instructions within the gameplay is a very difficult situation to put into it. Like, a lot of gamers like myself usually skip the tutorial and just start playing the game, and then when we run into something that the tutorial would have explained, we end up saying, how do we do this? What do we do? And that can be a problem. It can be difficult, especially if you stop playing a game after a while and you forget all the mechanics. That can also be a problem. I'm sure some of us have gone through that, where, for example, I played Hollow Knight, got halfway through the game, stopped playing. When I came back, I had no idea what I was doing. And because of that, I had to start a new game because I was just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't remember any of this. So those are the things that you kind of think about when you're a game developer, I would say. Like, you're probably going to think, well, if the player leaves the game and comes back, will they be able to adequately play? Will they still be frustrated? If they get stuck on a puzzle, will they have to look up a guide? If they don't have adequate internet connection, could we give them a little push in the right direction? Because that's also something that I've become much more aware about. Sorry about that, but it's something I've become more aware of as I've streamed. I've seen people talk to me about how they just don't have an internet connection that is viable enough, and they end up just not being able to look up basic things. It's surprising, but it does happen. So how do you put functions within the game that allow the player to navigate something when they don't have the ability to find the answer themselves? It's also like not all gamers are on the same level. It's like when I was playing Doom Eternal, I remember there were players who were saying, hey, I play this game on easy difficulty. Is that like something I should be ashamed of or something? Like, it was weird stuff that I really didn't really think was that big of a deal. But at the same time, there are people who shame other gamers just because they play things on easy difficulty or they use other means to complete a game. I don't really care as long as it's a single player game. If it's a multiplayer game, that's a whole new can of worms. You shouldn't cheat in those. But yeah, let's just watch the end of the video. Let's see if he says anything else.
That mainstream games are lacking these days. I just hope they learn from their mistakes. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now. Okay,
so I think I've said a lot of what I said adequately based on his argument, but I think the critical drinker is wrong here. I know that's rare. Like, I usually agree with a lot of things he says, but when you convey that games hold your hand way too much, but then you say when a game gives you that level of freedom you're looking for, and you don't have the time to complete it. Well, there are other games from Software that gives you that same level of freedom that you're looking for that you can play. Like, a lot more players are going back to older games right now. If you want that level of freedom, you can play the Dark Souls franchise. Literally, they don't hold your hand for that. I don't know why my nose is itching so much, but yeah, Dark Souls, they literally don't hold your hand. Armored Core 6 doesn't hold your hand. Wukong doesn't hold your hand. A lot of Souls-like games don't really hold your hand, like The Surge. What else is a good one? Well, I would say Final Fantasy 16 kind of doesn't hold your hand but that game, they kind of really reduced the open world of that title. It's more like semi-open worlds and a lot of empty spaces. But yeah, I don't agree with a lot of things he said here because it's more of a personal argument. Like, I can get he's frustrated about games today not giving him the freedom that he craves, that just leave him alone and let him explore the world. But you kind of have to look at it from the outside and see other gamers and how they interpret games. Like the way I just argued about how people who came to my chat when I was playing Doom Eternal for the first time, how they was talking about how the game was too hard for them. They play on easy difficulty. Perfectly fine. That's how they experience the game. Or people who get really lost in Souls-like games like I do. Like, I need a guide for Dark Souls 1, 2. I need a guide for Bloodborne. Like, the game literally tells you nothing. And it's just a radically different environment for each different player, and you have to create a game that caters to a larger audience of people based on an array of factors. Nothing's going to be hard pressed on anyone. And I would say maybe people would be frustrated about Tomb Raider and its frustrating jumps. Maybe they are too precise, because this is my opinion. If I had to do a very, very precise jump in a game and I died and had to go back 10 minutes back only to try that jump again, I would be pissed off. I would be really, really angry just because of one jump and I missed it after a millimeter. Yeah, that would suck. So the idea of giving players more avenue of mistakes, I think, is a better option. Like, it shouldn't be too critical, but it should give them enough space that if they make one tiny mistake, it doesn't punish them to the point that they get completely crippled into the ground. But tell me, what do you think in the comments below about all of this? I'd love to hear your opinion. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave a dislike on this video. I don't agree with what he said here, but I'm pretty sure that's going to make me feel like a bad guy. But I do agree with a lot of things the Critical Drinker says. This is just something I don't. But tell me what you think in the comments below. I'd like to hear other people's opinions. And that's it for me. Bye.